Meet the M4 carbine. One of the most recognizable American carbines in the world. For decades, it has been almost a symbol of the modern U.S. military. Since the 1990s, the M4 has been carried through wars, military operations, and countless missions around the world. You've probably seen it before. In video games. In movies. In documentaries showing real combat. Digital versions of the M4 family have appeared in Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and countless other games. But the most interesting part begins when we stop looking at it as something from a movie or a video game. Because the real M4 was the weapon of American service members for decades. It was carried by U.S. forces during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, it became a familiar sight on patrols, at checkpoints, and in the hands of soldiers operating in some of the world's most demanding terrain. The M4 wasn't created from scratch. It was the result of decades of weapons development. At the center of that story was an engineer named Eugene Stoner. Stoner was working at Armalite, where the goal was radically different: make a military rifle lighter, more controllable, and easier to carry. Instead of traditional steel construction, the AR-15 made extensive use of lightweight materials, including aluminum and reinforced polymer. It was also chambered for a new, smaller, high-velocity cartridge, the .223 Remington. The concept was so different that the U.S. military initially had serious doubts about it. But testing showed something important: the lightweight rifle was fast, accurate, and surprisingly effective. That performance eventually attracted the attention of the U.S. military, and the rifle's future began to change. In 1964, the U.S. military officially adopted the AR-15's military descendant as the M16. And then came Vietnam, where the M16 was about to face its biggest test. But the early M16 had serious reliability problems in combat, and soldiers quickly discovered that a new rifle could still have old problems. The solution was the M16A1, introduced with changes that made the rifle far more reliable in the field. M16A1 became the standard American service rifle, and its basic design would remain in service for decades. But the battlefield was changing. Soldiers increasingly needed a weapon that was shorter and easier to handle. The answer was already hiding inside the M16 family: make it shorter, without changing what made the rifle effective. That idea produced the M16A2 carbine family, and eventually the design that would become the M4. In 1994, that evolution reached a major milestone: the M4 officially entered U.S. military service. Compared with the M16A2, the M4 was shorter and more compact, while keeping the same basic 5.56mm ammunition and operating system. And that compact size made a huge difference in vehicles, buildings, and close-quarters environments. But the M4 was never just a shorter M16. It was becoming a new standard of its own. By the early 2000s, the M4 was no longer a niche carbine. It was becoming one of the most recognizable rifles in the American arsenal. Then came Iraq and Afghanistan, where the M4 would spend the next 2 decades proving itself in combat. Its compact design was especially useful in cities, where soldiers had to move through narrow streets, vehicles, and buildings. And while the battlefield was changing, the M4 was changing with it. Optics, lights, lasers, and other accessories transformed the M4 from a simple carbine into a highly adaptable weapons platform. The result was a rifle that could be configured differently for different missions, without changing its basic identity. And that flexibility helped push the M4 far beyond its original role as a simple infantry carbine. It became familiar far beyond the battlefield too, appearing in films, television, and countless digital worlds. Its digital counterpart even became a familiar weapon in games like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, and Battlefield. But perhaps the most interesting part of the M4 story is that its evolution did not stop with the original 1994 design. The M4A1 introduced one of the most important changes. Full auto fire replaced the original M4's 3-round burst. And then came another major change. The old carrying handle gave way to a flat-top receiver, opening the door to modern optics. With optics, rails, and new accessories, the M4A1 became far more modular than the rifle introduced in 1994. By this point, the M4 was no longer just an American weapon. It had become a global military icon. And its influence reached beyond the United States, with M4 variants and derivatives appearing in the arsenals of countries around the world. But after more than 3 decades of service, the question became unavoidable: how much longer could the M4 remain America's standard? But why replace a rifle that had already proven itself for decades? The answer was simple: the battlefield had changed. The M4 was designed around mobility and controllability. The M7 was designed to push effective range and terminal performance much further. After more than 30 years, the M4 remains one of the most recognizable rifles in modern military history. And that may be the most remarkable thing about the M4: it survived not because it never changed, but because it kept adapting. From the M16 family to the M4, from the M4 to the M4A1, and now toward the M7, this is the evolution of one of the most influential military carbines ever created. So, is the story of the M4 over? Not quite. The M7 may be its successor, but the M4's legacy is far from finished. From a compact version of the M16 to a weapon recognized across the world, the M4 became much more than just another service rifle. And now, after more than 30 years, one question remains: what will its next chapter look like?